Second platoon, listen up.
We're gonna die.
This was the biggest movie in Britain in 1955, and almost nobody remembers it now. It's about a Royal Air Force mission to blow up German dams using bombs that skip across the water like stones. The actual inventor of the bomb read the script and approved it. The Royal Air Force gave the production their full blessing and pulled 4 real Lancaster bombers out of storage for them to use. Active duty pilots flew the planes during filming. They even cast actors who looked so much like the real pilots they barely needed makeup. They shot in black and white so they could cut in real footage from actual bomb tests and make it all look seamless. The screenplay came from 2 first-hand accounts, including the squadron leader's own memoir. But here's the thing that gets me. The bouncing bomb in the movie is the wrong shape. They had to change it because in 1955, the actual bomb was still classified. A weapon that was used 12 years earlier was still an official secret, so they couldn't show what it really looked like. Also, if that final attack run looks familiar, that's because George Lucas basically copied it for the Death Star trench run in Star Wars. So this mostly forgotten British film accidentally invented one of the most iconic sequences in movie history. The movie opens with a statistic. 40,000 Germans served on U-boats during the war. 30,000 of them never came back. Then you watch a group of submariners getting drunk at a tavern before they ship out, and you know most of these guys are going to die. The film puts you inside that submarine with them, and it feels unbearably real. When the depth charges start going off around them, it's genuinely terrifying to watch. The actual captain of the real U-96 worked as a consultant on the film. So did the first officer from another submarine. These guys had been through it themselves. Director Wolfgang Peterson got the original blueprints for the submarine from the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. Then he gave those plans to the same company that built U-boats during the war and paid them to construct a full-sized working replica. It was their first submarine since 1945. Peterson was obsessive about accuracy. He said every screw on the set matched what they used in actual wartime submarines. But the most committed thing they did was film the whole movie in chronological order over the course of an entire year. The actors weren't allowed to go outside in sunlight during that time. So by the end of the shoot, they actually looked like men who had been trapped underwater for months because in a real sense, they had been. Producer Darryl Zanuck didn't treat this like a normal movie. He treated it like he was trying to rebuild D-Day from scratch. He brought in over 24 military advisors, and most of them were actual D-Day veterans. He insisted that all dialogue be spoken in the correct language with subtitles. That was a risky choice for a Hollywood movie in 1962, but he wouldn't budge on it. They filmed on the actual D-Day beaches. They shot in the town where paratroopers landed in 1944, and the production looked so real that locals who had lived through the actual invasion started throwing stones at actors wearing German uniforms. Zanuck even tried to recreate the paratrooper drop using real paratroopers jumping from planes, but the wind ruined that plan. Over 2,000 actual soldiers worked as extras during the 9-month shoot. The whole production was massive. Roger Ebert said this movie was dull because there's no real character development. But that was the whole point. The film isn't about any one person, it's about the attack itself. They had 2 separate directing teams working at the same time, one American and one Japanese, and neither side gets softened or simplified. The production took 3 years just to plan before they shot anything. They tracked down real World War II planes and fixed them up, mainly B-17s and P-40s. For the Japanese carrier scenes, they leased an actual decommissioned aircraft carrier called the USS Yorktown. That's 36,000 tons of ship just sitting there as a movie set. The explosions in the attack scenes were real and timed to go off as the planes flew past. A pilot died during rehearsals before they even started filming. This was genuinely dangerous work. The producer of this movie was a World War II general himself. His name was Frank McCarthy, and he spent almost 20 years trying to get this thing made. The screenplay drew from General Omar Bradley's autobiography, and Bradley was still alive during production. He showed up on set and gave advice on how to write and shoot specific scenes. Francis Ford Coppola wrote the script years before he became famous, and he built that iconic opening speech by stitching together things Patton actually said in real life. George C. Scott did obsessive research for the role. He watched every newsreel he could find and read all the biographies. When the movie came out, veterans who had actually served under Patton said Scott captured him perfectly. These were men who knew the real guy personally, and they said the performance was exactly right. Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks made this miniseries about Easy Company, 101st Airborne Division, and from the start they decided the actual veterans would have final say over everything. Not the studio, not the directors. The guys who were actually there. So the production tracked down as many surviving Easy Company members as they could. The actors talked to the real soldiers before filming. The crew called veterans to ask what specific weapons were used in specific moments. And before any episode could air, the veterans had to watch it and approve it. If the guys who lived through it said something was wrong, it got changed. For the premiere, the production flew 47 Easy Company veterans to Normandy. 47 old men who had parachuted into France decades earlier got to sit in a theater and watch actors recreate the worst and most important days of their lives. Making a movie about Hitler's last days in the bunker is tricky because you're asking an audience to spend 2 hours with history's worst monster. Director Oliver Hirschbiegel decided to do something controversial. He humanized him. The film is based partly on the memoirs of one of Hitler's secretaries who was in that bunker. They reconstructed what 1940s Berlin looked like in those final days. But the real story here is what actor Bruno Ganz did to prepare. He studied everything available on Hitler, every account, every piece of footage. But Hitler carefully controlled his public image and never allowed recordings of his normal speaking voice, so Ganz had to find something else. Turns out Finnish intelligence secretly recorded Hitler having a private conversation in 1942. It's the only recording of what he actually sounded like when he wasn't performing. Ganz studied that tape. Then he went to a Swiss hospital and spent time with Parkinson's patients so he could accurately show how Hitler's body was falling apart in those final days. The result is a performance that feels unsettlingly realistic. The film got nominated for an Academy Award, and it's still controversial because it refuses to let Hitler be a monster. It makes him a person, and that's way more disturbing to sit with. Clint Eastwood made 2 movies about the Battle of Iwo Jima at the same time. Flags of Our Fathers told the American side. Letters from Iwo Jima told the Japanese side. The second one is the more remarkable achievement. Eastwood discovered a book while researching Flags of Our Fathers. It was a collection of letters written by Japanese general and his soldiers before they died. Nearly all of them died. Over 20,000 Japanese soldiers defended that island, and fewer than 1,000 survived. So Eastwood decided to make a major American studio film entirely in Japanese with an all-Japanese cast. That basically never happens. Letters from Iwo Jima won an Oscar for sound editing. But more importantly, it showed American audiences what that battle looked like from the other side. Louis Zamperini was an Olympic runner who survived 47 days on a raft in the Pacific Ocean and then spent years being tortured in Japanese camps. Laura Hillenbrand wrote a book about him that became a bestseller, and Angelina Jolie directed the adaptation. Zamperini was 97 years old when they were making the film. Jolie developed a close relationship with him and kept him involved throughout. When it came time to cast the lead role, Zamperini watched Jack O'Connell's audition tape and gave his approval. O'Connell trained with an Olympic-level running coach who taught him the 1930s style of distance running so the racing scenes would look period accurate. He also had to lose a significant amount of weight for the camp sequences. The day before Zamperini entered the ICU for the final time, Jolie brought her computer to the hospital, climbed onto his bed, and screened a rough cut of the film for him. He got to see his story before he died. Christopher Nolan is obsessive about doing things for real when other directors would use computers. For Dunkirk, he took that as far as it could go. He used thousands of extras. He got historic boats from the actual 1940 evacuation. He used real Spitfires from the Imperial War Museum. And when they needed to film a plane landing on Dunkirk Beach, pilot Dan Friedkin actually landed a Spitfire on that beach. First time a plane had touched down there since 1940. The production team built a custom Spitfire with enough room for both the pilot and an IMAX camera rig. When they needed shots of aircraft crashing into the English Channel, they built large-scale radio-controlled models and actually crashed them into the water instead of using computers. 12 of the original little ships that participated in the real evacuation appeared in the film, recreating what their owners had done 77 years earlier. Nolan and his wife even made the crossing from England to Dunkirk by boat themselves. It took 19 hours because of sea conditions. He wanted to understand what those civilians went through. For the London premiere, about 30 Dunkirk survivors showed up, guys in their mid-90s who had actually been on that beach. They watched the film and said it captured what really happened. But they did have one note: the soundtrack was louder than the actual bombardment.